And just remember from the beginning, John's important things, employees, customers, and community. That's who you service. So I try to follow those rules, and it's worked out very well.
We're good? Okay. So I know who you are.
Yep.
But go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm Jim Ohnstad, better known as Mr. OK. I've been here so long. The other day I was up at Social Security with my wife trying to get something straightened out. And the guy looked at the screen and he looked at me and he kind of had a puzzled look on his face. You've worked at the same place for 60 years? In one place? And I said, yes, I did. Pretty unusual, but my dad owned this place, so that's why I have so many years there.
Right. Yeah, that's an impressive feat. That's not something that you see every day.
Normally you hear 35, 40 years for most people in one place, but
so can you kind of go back and let's just start from the beginning. You know, your dad owned the shop there, and just kind of give us the story. Give us the whole story.
Oh boy, 60 years worth of.
Yeah, let's go.
Have you got a couple days?
we have a lot of time booked off for this, so.
Well, my dad, and I use my dad and I use John interchangeably because at work I always called him John. I don't know, it felt unusual, I guess, to be the boss's son and calling him Dad. But Dad bought this store. Well, let me start before that because you need a little history of John to understand how he went to business.
Absolutely.
He got out of the war, went to Hanson Mechanical Trade School to learn the profession of auto body repair. So he went to work at Ed Shum Pontiac, which that building is now Fargo Linoleum on Robert Street.
Okay.
Well, Ed Shum tried to run the business from Florida. That's where he liked to go in the winter. General Motors wasn't getting paid or something. They came and locked the place up on Christmas Eve.
Oh, no.
Gave everybody their pink slip. Well, my dad was pretty well put out on that note, but they let him come back for the next 2 weeks and finish up the car repairs that were in the shop so that people could get their car back. Then he went to work for Berkey Lincoln Mercury, which was on 10th Street. I think Park Realty owns that building now.
Okay.
And I started out in the body shop, but body business is kind of tough on you. You do a lot of hand sanding back then with files, and his ribs would get sore. So he decided that maybe car sales was better. So he started out in used car sales, eventually worked up to new car sales. The commission for a Lincoln was $100. A Mercury was $50.
And what year was that?
This would be 1958.
All right.
57, 58. And Edsel's were $25. he didn't sell too many Edsels. But rather than stick around the showroom and wait for people to come in, he liked to sell Lincolns because that was the $100 commission. So he would go out to these farms and take a farmer and his wife for a test drive and get them interested in a Lincoln.
Okay.
And he was very successful at it. So one day he's out in Jamestown. The farmer and his wife said, oh, they'll take it. It was on Friday, and John said, well, my Saturday day off is Saturday this week. Do you want to come in? I'll make a special trip in and get everything done for you. No, they said, we'll come in on Monday. Well, the next morning they got up, had breakfast, thought about it. Well, maybe we should go get the car. They got excited about it. So they came in, and John wasn't there. Another salesman helped him out, got it all taken care of. John walked in on Monday morning. They turn in call cards on every prospective buyer. And Walt, the sales manager, wanted to split the commission between my dad and the guy that helped the farm couple out. He didn't like that response at all. He said, I turned my call card in. That sale is mine. And Walt kind of argued about it. And John said, well, if you split the commission, take that as my 2-week notice. And Walt did not split the commission. And so my dad quit 2 weeks later and went to work for OK Tire. Now, the two gentlemen that owned OK Tire, Russ Tweeden and Dick Currier. You might have heard the name Currier before. His two kids, Dave and Danny, started Dakota Fence.
Okay.
But Dick didn't like the tire business all that well, so my dad bought his half of the business for $1,500. And Russ Tweeden didn't care for the tire business either. He liked to come to work at 9 and go home at 3.
Okay.
Well, my dad kind of made the proposal to him. He said, why don't I buy your half out also? And Russ became a very successful insurance salesman.
Okay.
But then John, in 1960, incorporated OK Tire, and him and Mom were the sole owners.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but it was a franchise at that point, right?
No, it was an independent store.
Okay.
Now, OK Tire nationwide, headquarters out of Denver, Colorado, had 6 company stores and 1,100 independent stores. And it was $1 a year was the franchise, so it was very minimal. But you bought your retreading equipment from them, your raw rubber to put on the retreads, and some of the truing and balancing machines also came from them. So there was quite a bit of tie in there. Some of the stores that were close to us, Jim Nyquist out of Elbow Lake, Minnesota, had an OK Tire store. There was another one in, I want to say Aberdeen, but it was Huron.
Okay.
So there was a number of them around. And we reached, at that point, the original building was pretty tough shape. Only had one door in it on the west side where the showroom is, and that was the alignment pit. So my dad did alignments, sold tires, changed tires. They only had 3 or 4 employees.
Oh, wow.
Paul Gershner was a retreader. Paul looked like he was about 89 years old forever. I was probably 11 years old when Dad bought the store, and I remember Paul looking the same as he did 30 years later. He just always looked old. But anyway, a nice old guy. And him and I did some projects together. I was taking architecture in 11th grade, and so we were doing machine, I want to say tin layouts, and you'd cut them out and put it all together.
Okay.
And Paul was trying to make a rubber auger. And the idea is these farmers, a lot of times, get their arm or leg in the auger. Well, he figured if they had a 4-foot extension on the end of the auger, and it was rubber, you could not, you could put your foot in there or your hand in there, and it wouldn't hurt you.
Yeah.
It might hurt, but it wouldn't tear your arm off.
Right.
So I did all the layout for the auger. So we cut small strips of rubber and put them on a metal one, and eventually figured out how to put it on without the metal one. And they tested them out to Wesco. They would have several bins. One would have oats in it, another corn, another one wheat. And they would auger it into one bin and then back in another. And it found out that the rubber auger actually worked better than the steel auger in the fact that it didn't break up the kernels, and it actually went faster because it didn't fight the flow like a steel auger would.
Okay.
So it was kind of unique. And
So is that like a patent that you have out there then as an
well, my dad
11-year-old?
went back and forth to Minneapolis. It couldn't make them by hand. So they were trying to figure out how to do it with an injection mold.
Okay.
But when they would take and make the mold and then cut it in half so they could take the two halves out, well, it disappears into the metals. It doesn't come out like one piece.
Okay.
So he spent a lot of money going back and forth to Minneapolis because he would go at night after it closed the shop up. He would run to Minneapolis, meet the guys 9, 10 o'clock at night, and then still drive home so he could be to work the next morning. So he spent a lot of time with that.
That's a lot.
In the old building, it was a little bit haphazard. We changed the tires in the gravel where the customers park in front of the showroom. That was all gravel.
Okay.
So we jacked the cars up. Had electric air wrench. They weren't air, but they were electric wrenches, hammer wrenches. And of course, when it rained, you might get a little zap once in a while of electricity.
Keeps you awake, right?
Yeah. So Valdy James was the son of, I think the owner that owned OK Tire down in Denver is named James James. Kind of a funny deal, but that was on a piece of equipment, the James Auto Float machine. So I always took that, and he must have been the founder. Had a lot of patents for truing and balancing and retreading. Our retreaded mold was different than Fargo Tires. Ours was a 3-piece mold, a bottom piece and 2 top pieces, and it was upright, and so they would clamp together. When you put our retread on a wheel and turn it on the balancer, it was nice and even all the way around. When you put the Fargo Tire mold retread on there, that was a clamshell, 2 halves horizontally.
Yep.
Well, sometimes they didn't always match up the 2 halves.
Oh.
So you'd have the tire there, and half the tire would be up at maybe a 1/4 inch, and as you roll the tire down, then it went the other side up
goodness.
half inch. So the only way to straighten it out was to true some of the rubber off it. Anyway, that was a little difference. One of my jobs as an 11-year-old, because you couldn't work in the shop at that young age, was to paint used tires.
Okay.
Now people go, you painted tires? That's kind of odd. We had a 5-gallon bucket, had a rubber glove with a wash mitt over the top, and I would take raw rubber from Paul. He did the retreading, the stuff that had not been run through a mold yet into a tire, so it was just raw rubber. Cut off little pieces, and we'd throw it in there and put a couple gallons of gasoline in it, and tomorrow it would kind of dissolve, and you'd mix it around, and you had black paint. So you could put this tire on a Lazy Susan, give it a spin, dip your mitt in the black paint, and you could make it right to the white wall. You could just make a nice even edge. The idea was that the tread looked deeper when they were painted.
Okay.
So when the tires were sitting in a used tire rack, they looked better.
Yeah.
Painted. So that was one of my first jobs.
Did you ever have to paint like the white walls? Because in the late 60s, that was still a popular style, wasn't it? Or was it not?
White walls, and a lot of them are wide white walls, like 3-inch.
Yep.
We didn't necessarily paint them, but we used bleach white.
Okay. Get them clean again?
Scrub them up, when you got them mounted and make them look good. But one of my other fascinating jobs was making white walls.
Okay.
We had kind of a horizontal hot plate with a dome cover on it and a buffer. So you'd mount the tire on a rim, put a tube in it, mount it up. And on this electric motor, it had 2 rasps. On one side, it had a 3/4 inch rough rasp, and on the other end of it, it had a finish rasp, very fine. So you'd grind into the side of a sidewall about a 1/4 inch deep, And you could make however wide you wanted. If you wanted a 1-inch wide, 3/4 inch, 1 inch, you would just make the groove wider. I could make up to a 3-inch white wall. And we had white rubber that hadn't been cured yet, so I would lay it on the lazy Susan, and after I put the groove in it, then we put the adhesive on there, and then the white rubber, it almost looked like a roll of caulking.
Okay.
So it was about 3/4 inch wide, and I would lay that strip in there, and then we'd throw it on a hot plate, put the tube in it, put the clamshell over it, and then put air to it so the tube forced down onto the hot plate.
Yeah.
Cook it for a half hour. Take it out. Now it had overflowed onto part of the black. So that I'd take the finish rasp then, put up against it, grind it back even with the sidewall of the tire, and it came out with a very nice, fine, sharp-looking white wall. So Selling Motors would order in the Pontiacs. They were down the street where U-Haul is now.
Okay.
And they would order in the Pontiacs with all black walls. And for $4 a tire, I would turn them into white walls. And they would in turn charge the customer $16 a tire for white walls instead of black walls.
That's so cool. That's awesome. I mean, nowadays you touch a sidewall and the tire's bad. Mm-hmm. But you were grinding into them, and
yeah, with the radial tire, that all ended because the radial tire in the sidewall weaves in and out. There's no way to grind it even.
Gotcha. So you were working with all bias plies.
Yeah, all bias ply tires back then.
Makes sense.
So one of my recollections of my dad, he was down in the alignment pit doing an alignment, and he had a trouble light hanging under there. They got done with the alignment, and the customer was in the car going to back it out. Well, they got back just a few feet, and they said, wait, the trouble light. Well, he put it in drive to come ahead, but he accidentally stepped on the gas pedal, went over the end of the pit, and pinned my dad against the cabinet. Oh, no. And the only thing that saved my dad was the cabinet. It crushed in far enough that it held the car there.
Oh, my goodness.
Some of the weight of the car. So several people jumped down the pit. They kind of lifted the car up. My dad kind of slithered out from there. But I remember him laying on the couch for a couple days. He had about 3 or 4 broken ribs.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, so he was kind of taped up, waiting to heal up a little bit.
Yeah.
But I know he was anxious to go back to work, so he didn't stay there very long. Mm-hmm. But
he had things to do.
Yeah, that was one of the accidents that happened in the old building.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. Well, then in 11th grade, I was doing a little drawing at home and architecture, he asked me to draw up a brand new building. So I drew up kind of a layout, according to what he was telling me he wanted, of the new building that's here now.
Okay.
So I'm the original architect. Although they took my crude drawings to an architect and had to, do up official blueprints.
But what were you building it for? Because obviously since then there was a bunch of add-ons because the business got bigger. We have more things going on. So what did that original plan look like?
Well, it went from the office and had the spiral staircase in it. That was kind of early.
Love that thing.
We found that as a erector set, so to speak, out of Dallas, Texas, in a magazine. I think it was called Columns Inc. or something, and we put it together ourselves.
Okay.
But anyway, the original building went to Bay 5 or 6, the one tall door where the semis could go in. That's where the building ended. But it was kind of unique as my dad didn't have much money. He went to the bank and was going to borrow money so he could build the building. Don Green at Merchants Bank at that time turned him down. Said, John, you don't have any equity or, anything to back it up. So my dad had enough money to dig the hole and put the footings in.
Okay.
And winter was coming, so he got some straw and black plastic and covered it all up. Ole Romasmo, who owned Fargo Tank at the time and about half the land between here and West Fargo, happened to come in, and I think Ole was a little bit of a mentor to my dad.
Okay.
Ole said, John, he says, I didn't know you had so much money you could bury it in the ground. My dad proceeded to tell him that the bank wouldn't give him a loan. He didn't have any collateral. Oh, that never stopped Ole. So he says, John, let's get in the car. And around the block they went over on First Avenue, almost straight across the tracks from here. And concrete sectional at that time made concrete blocks, 8 by 12 concrete blocks. So he talked him into loaning my dad the block for the building. Ole would loan him the rebar for the roof and the tin. And over the winter, Don Troutman Construction put it all together. So while they were constructing it, I had grown up to, let's see, probably I was about 15 at that time. And they had a 6-cylinder Chevy pickup, a little half-ton pickup, and a 14-foot trailer with 3-foot sides on it. We called it the hog trailer. And they didn't get the doors on before it snowed. So if you can imagine from Bay 2 all the way to the truck stall bay, 3 feet of snow. That was my job, was to shovel it out by hand, load it in that 14-foot hog trailer, take it 6 blocks down to the slough, and then unload it by hand and come. I don't know how many loads I went back and forth. And I didn't even have a driver's license. But it must have took me about a week or two. I don't remember. But
No one ever came out and yelled at you and said, work faster?
no, it was a grueling. And of course, the guys working in the tire store were still changing tires in the old building. So eventually, 1965 or 6, they came in with 2 bulldozers and 4 dump trucks, smashed the old building, loaded it all up, and it was all gone within about a half hour.
Oh, wow.
So then that became Bay 1, and the office then were built the following year.
Okay.
So we operated in the meanwhile out of where the compressors, well, at that time the compressor, now it's just the back room behind the bays.
Okay.
That was where the office was.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's not an office now.
Yeah. But that was quite a feat, get the building up. Then when the spring came and they had the building up, then my dad went back to Don Green at Merchant Bank and said, I'm looking for that loan. And Don said, well, I told you didn't have any collateral. And he said, yes, I do. I have a building. It's up. Oh, you're shitting me. So they got in the car and came back over here. And sure enough, Don said, oh, my God, you got the building up. Okay, now you got collateral. So he was able to pay Ole off and concrete sectional by July that following year and square that away.
I had no idea that Ole at some point had his hands into OK Tire as well.
Yeah.
Man, that guy built an empire.
Oh, he did.
Holy.
Yeah. When he first came in, Woody was one of our salesmen. He started in 1962. And he said, never judge a guy by his clothes. Ole wore this old coat with a fur collar and went down to about an inch off the floor, had about a week's worth of growth and a beard. And Woody silently said to me, he owns millions. He's owns Fargo Tank and half the land between here and West Fargo. And him and my dad were good buddies.
That's pretty cool.
One time he came in to show my dad a check he had in his pocket. A good friend of theirs that they spent a lot of time socializing with invented a trolling machine over in Moorhead. And he passed away, and the missus didn't know much about what to do, so she confided in Ole, could you help me out? So Ole went over and kind of would give her $2,500 a month out of his own pocket, and to keep it going, and made a deal with her. He would buy it from her, set up a trust, and she would get $2,500 for life out of this trust. So he bought it, several $100,000. He raised the building up, poured concrete walls underneath, set the building back down on the walls, refabricated the arrangement how they made the product, and sold it to Evinrude or Mercury for $2 million. So he was proud of that check in his pocket.
Yeah.
He had to show my dad that check.
That's pretty.
That was,
Man, there's a lot of history in this town that you just never know of.
yep, who helped out who.
Yeah.
And back then, everybody knew everybody. Another friend of his was Mr. Wimmer from Wimmer's Jewelry.
Yeah.
Came to town and made a go of the jewelry business.
That's just insane to hear those names, and then I can think of in today's world where you still see them.
Yep.
I mean, you don't really see Romsmo everywhere, but how many companies are under the Romsmo name?
Yep. Another one of his buddies was the mobile oil distributor. I can't even think of his name. I'll think of it in a minute. Anyway, my dad would go into business with these guys, Ole, and my dad had a building not too far from Fargo Tank together. Steffes Auctioneers is in that building now.
Okay.
And then, Keith Johnson was the mobile oil distributor. So Keith and him had where Simonson gas station is now.
On Main Avenue?
Main Avenue.
Okay.
It was a smaller, gas station at that time, but they were half and half in business at that one, and another one in Galesburg. So when my dad passed away, then I had to try and get rid of all these buildings because try to keep track of all these different adventures that he had, So,
He had to stay busy, right?
yeah.
So in 1965 is when you did the remodel.
Yep.
So then what happened? What happened after that?
Well,
As far
let's
as
see.
your story, your role.
My role. Well, I got drafted in the Army. Spent 3 years over the Korea. So when I got back, I actually had gone to NDSU for architecture. Had started before I got drafted. Took a quarter of school off to get ahead of my finances, and then I got drafted because I was 19. And I got back and went back to school for a short bit, but I took business classes instead. I looked at my dad's profession and thought, tire business might not be all bad. He's been to Japan, Paris, Brazil, Mexico, you name it, he's been all over the place, different conventions. Maybe there's something to that. So we made a deal that I'd come to work here and eventually ascend to be the boss years later. But it's been a lot of hard years. It's hard to differentiate myself from OK Tire because, you spend 8-10 hours a day here every day, and it sort of becomes your life. So, I went from changing car tires, did that for several years. Then one day, the truck stall manager quit, so they said, well, go down there and manage a truck stall. So I went down there, and we only had about 4 people. One was on a service truck, so he was gone most of the time. Then there was 3 of us. One quit the next day. I fired the other one, and 2 days later, he wasn't working. So it was me for several days, changing truck tires and not knowing a whole lot about it, but, I did okay.
Yeah, you made it work.
Yeah. And back then they weren't tubeless, so they weren't quite as easy. They were all tube type with lock rings, so you had to be careful you didn't blow yourself up.
Yeah.
Eventually I hired a couple more, and that worked out well. And then I became the warehouse manager because they started buying semi-loads of tires rather than smaller mounts. Originally, we were a Dayton tire distributor. That was our main tire.
Okay.
And we were buying them out of Associated Independent Dealer in Minneapolis. So we would just get, 200 tires once a week on a truck.
So 200 a week that would last you.
Yeah.
Okay. And is that for passenger tires or was that for like commercial semis?
Mostly all just passenger at that point.
200 a week.
We did get some Dayton truck tire bias ones. They didn't have radials back then. And so as warehouse manager, my dad put up the warehouse out here from used steel. He was kind of a scrounger. He'd be out pheasant hunting, and he'd always go to the farm, ask for permission. Well, he'd always see some extra steel laying here and there. Well, he was managed to put it all together and bring it home piece by piece. And one day he's going to build a warehouse.
Yeah.
So him and one other guy, Leroy Amundsen, over a period of a couple months, put the warehouse up. The tire reps would come. Where's John? They would want to sell him a new program on tires, buy a trailer load or whatever the program was. Well, he's up on the roof. And they would just kind of think we were kidding him. No, he's up on the roof. You want to see him, you got to go march up the ladder. So they would go back there, climb the ladder, and talk to John for 10, 15 minutes.
Then come back down.
Come back down. So that's how he did business that one summer till they got that warehouse up.
I mean, it's got to show persistence in the vendors coming around. If you weren't willing to go up the ladder, you're not going to get any business.
In those early years before the building was built, talk about determination, they would change tires in the daytime, and then he would get on the service truck from 7 at night till 10,
be on call
all summer long, changing tractor rears by himself. So that's how he got to know all these farmers. And we'd go pheasant hunting. I was a little kid, about 12 years old, and we'd go to the farm, and they'd come out, John, yeah, come on in, have a cup of coffee, No, I know we're here to go pheasant hunting with the kids, and we had several grown-ups and their kids. And it was I just amazed at how did he know all these farmers?
Yeah.
Well, he sold them all them cars. Yeah. And that's how they remembered him.
What a way to build a community for yourself, though.
Oh,
wow.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun times, a lot of tougher times, but yeah. Volney James, the son I started to mention earlier, came up to visit once in a while. And he was a little bit like a playboy.
Okay.
Dressed in a suit. And I know my dad borrowed a rifle from him. It was gold inlaid 30-06 or something to go hunting in Nebraska for elk.
He was a flashy guy.
Yeah. He was a flashy guy. But anyway, one thing he did for my dad is my dad wanted to go someplace for a 4-day weekend or whatever it was. So Volney just said, I'll come up and man the store for you, sell tires. And he did. And he convinced my dad, he said, you can't be doing alignments and answering the phone and selling tires at the counter. He said, you have to hire a gal. So he paid for the gal for a month. And my dad found that it worked out so well that then he took her on as an employee.
Oh, wow.
So,
he realized how much more he was able to do.
Yeah, he was able to accomplish so much more without having to answer the phone and quite so often.
Right.
So anyway, that worked out well. That was Volney's kind of an unusual name, Volney. The other one was Harold James. And I believe Harold branched off after OK Tire went out of business and started Big O Tire.
Oh.
So that's how Big O started.
And what did he do before then?
Harold?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure what his position in the company was at OK Tire.
Okay.
One of the fellas that was doing the passenger retreading when Paul kind of retired. Can't think of his first name. His last name was Anderson. We did about 40 passenger tires a day, right in the area where the customer lounge is now. That's where the retreading was done.
How long did it take to change out a tire back then?
To do what?
To do like a set of 4 on a.
To retread them?
No, sorry. I was
to
thinking
change
about
them.
Yeah, to change them.
Oh, it was a lot faster back then. Today's tire changer goes around so slow. Yeah. We had the old manual changers. You broke the bead, you threw it up there, put the screws to it. You had a bar and you just winged it over, and you just used muscle power.
Yep.
So it took you less than 30 seconds to put a new tire on.
Man, if I could figure out a way to take if there's a limiter on those tire changers, I don't know, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, they go so slow. So that was really something that stepped backward, I thought. It used to take you maybe half an hour to do 4 tires.
Yeah.
And, of course, the bumper jacks were quite different. We didn't have hoists. You just had a bumper jack. And all these older cars, 1955, 56, whatever, humongous bumpers on them.
Yeah.
And we had this jack that was pneumatic, and boom, up it went. Dangerous as hell. If it slipped and came out of there, it's going to shoot past you. But anyway, it took you a lot less time to change tires.
How many vehicles could you fit in the shop at one time? Because the vehicles were also a lot larger back then.
Yeah, I did one per bay, and we only had 3 bays for tires. The 4th bay was for car alignments.
Okay.
That actually had a pit, 30 inches in the ground. The next bay was for mechanical, and then the truck stall.
Okay.
So the truck stall never saw a truck inside. We had way too many truck tires leaning up against the walls, and they would, during the flood of one year, I'm going to say 1966, I think was one of the drastic floods, because we got out of, maybe it was 60, too many floods, I can't remember all of them. I remember sandbagging one time I was in college, then another time. But anyway, and we had to contract to fix flat repairs for Northern Improvement.
Okay.
And they would bring like 40 spare tires at a time, all flat. Man, we changed flat repairs to no tomorrow for weeks on end until that flood was done.
So you keep everybody moving.
Yeah. Yeah, it was quite a process. But so, after we got the building up, and I remember we put a big spread in the Fargo Forum. They had a green section called the Farm Forum. It was actually a separate, I think it was on a Friday, a separate little tabloid, kind of like the Midweek Eagle or something. No, they stuck it in with the Forum. And we had the front page. It had a big picture of our new store.
Okay.
Up to the big truck stall. That's all the further the building went.
So when did OK Tire, when you say they went under, you mean the one in Denver, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So when did that go down?
Oh, boy. I don't recall, but I would say it was mid to late 60s.
So around the time when you had the new building.
Yeah.
Why not change the name at that time? Right? New building.
Well, there was still a camaraderie, I think, between the different stores. Jim Nyquist and Elbow Lake, we bought some tires together.
Okay.
To get a better discount. So from Associated Independent Dealer, AID in Minneapolis, we would take the load like 200 and then run him down 50 or 100, whatever he needed.
Gotcha.
And I think this the camaraderie of it, and nationwide there was 1,100 of them, so they had built up a name. I think since then, you go by some of the old ones. I've seen one in Florida not too far from where I have a condo. It's an old one, and most of them were ramshackle. I mean, really bad looking buildings. I used to have several pictures. One in North Platte, Nebraska, was one. The one that Jim Nyquist had actually was one of the nicer looking ones.
Okay.
But our original store was pretty much a shack. It looked pretty bad. I actually did go to Denver one time to get heating elements for our molds. Some of them had burned out, and some other equipment for the truing machines.
Okay.
Most people don't know what a truing machine is.
Yeah, can you explain that to us?
You put the tire on there, and you chuck it up by the bolt holes so that it's as round as it's going to be on the ground on the car. And it had a knife blade. There was two different ones. We had a manual machine that looked like a soup can, and the top edge was sharper than a razor blade. And as the machine spun the tire, there was a little mold on the side that followed, and you could change the mold on the side to a flatter one or a rounder one depending on the tire.
Okay.
So you'd set that up, and then you'd center it, and then you just take it back and forth across about 3 times and shave the rubber, the high spots.
Okay.
The theory is you could spin it around, take a piece of chalk, and you could put it up against it and find the low spot, usually, about 6 inches. Well, all that extra rubber actually made the tire wear faster because it was like a egg rolling down the highway. As it rolled over the high spot and hit on the low spot, it didn't wear the high spot off, it wore the low spot off. So as we trued the tire up and you had rubber shavings all over, people would just look at you and go, boy, you're wasting a lot of mileage there. No, you're saving all that mileage because it's going to just keep wearing the low spot faster and faster and faster. So you're just taking the high side off to make it. The tire actually ran cooler. That's the whole secret. People don't understand how a tire wears.
Right.
When you're driving down the highway, the tire is running at approximately 200 to 220 degrees. Now, the tire's made at 300, so you get a nail in it and you starts going low on air. That's why they give out eventually. They delaminate from the heat.
Yeah.
But tire wears from heat. So by truing them, you're cutting down on the heat.
Okay.
And on the automatic truing machine, similar deal. It had a little deal for the curvature. Different knife blade. It was just a round, about 2.5 inches, with a razor edge on it. And then it spun, but it had a sharpening stone that ran all the time, so it was continually sharpening. But same thing, you'd set it all up. This one was automatic. You'd set the far side, the inside, the outside, set the curvature, find the low spot, set the machine so it wouldn't go any lower than the low spot. Then you'd back it up, turn it on, and it would make 3 or 4 passes across, and true it itself, you go back and change another tire.
All right.
So that kind of speeded up the process a little bit.
And I imagine once you've trued it, it balances out better as well.
Yeah.
Because you're getting rid of all the different spots.
Yeah, getting rid of the heavy spot.
That's pretty cool.
So we used to true an awful lot of tires.
When did you stop doing that? Because that's definitely not something that really gets done today.
About 1967 is when the cars first started coming with radials on them, original equipment.
Oh, okay. So that was another kind of bias ply deal.
So that's about the time when that stuff started to fade out a little bit.
And for those of the people that will listen to this, probably don't understand the difference between bias and radial, can you explain that to us as well?
Sure. Let's see, the easiest way to explain it, when they make a bias tire, they would lay material like polyester material 45 degrees from one bead to the other, and then another layer 45 the other way, and it would be a 4-ply tire, 4 layers of polyester rubber with rubber in between. And those layers are always fighting each other as they roll around. A lot of heat is generated.
Yeah.
So the radial tire, they put it from bead to bead, and it's just like it rolls together.
Okay.
They don't fight each other.
That makes sense.
Now the steel belts go around the tire, but the bias versus radial sidewall, the radial sidewall, that's why you have that squat on the sidewall. They look like they're half flat.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, again, cutting down the heat from 200 back to about 180.
Okay.
So it's a matter of heat. And people ask, where does the rubber go? It is so fine of a particle that it floats away in the wind. You don't see black rubber banks against the side of the highway because it is so minute that it just floats away.
See, I never knew that. I mean, I haven't been doing this for that long, but learn something new every day. So this is cool. I like this.
Yeah.
Getting to know these stories.
They actually put collectors on the top of buildings in New York City, 10 stories up, and they can collect rubber dust that settles in the collectors.
Really?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
It's that minute. It just floats. It disappears.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Where does the rubber go? It just floats away.
I'd like to find a tire cutout. I looked the other day back here and downstairs a couple places. I didn't find one. We used to have several passenger tire cutouts.
Yep.
And we also had big semi cutouts. And I think we should get a hold of the tire reps and see if they still offer those.
Maybe.
What I would show the customer is, here's what makes a 40,000-mile radial versus an 80,000-mile radial. You see this piece of rubber right here next to the steel wire and in the bead?
Yeah.
That is natural rubber. Your tire is synthetic inside and out, but on the interior, it's natural rubber. Natural rubber dissipates heat faster than synthetic rubber. So this is what you're paying $60 for, and this is what you're paying $100 for.
See, I didn't know that either. I would love to see cutouts from tires back then to today as well, just with the advancements that they've made. Because now, a 60 to 70,000 mile rated, radial car tires that's like the standard now.
Yeah. You don't have a cheap 20,000-mile radial.
No, no.
When we did the retreads, we could do about 40 a day, passenger retreads, and they were all biased back then. But we would make them for about $10.
That's insane because you don't get car retreads anymore either.
But gasoline was 25 cents a gallon back then, so I mean, it was a different deal. But I would take a set of regular tread, bias retreads, and they had the stud holes in them for studs.
Yep.
And I would stud them up, and I'd put them on my Buick Skylark. I like to go skiing in the winter, and I'd go all the way to Hill City, 3 hours away, Sugar Hills and Quadna Mountain and all those places. But I could drive back, and being the sun had gone down, now the roads are glare ice. I get behind a dozen cars that are all doing 20 miles an hour, got their right tire in the gravel, and I would go around them. And this one time, this Mustang decided to follow me. So we're by Park Rapids. We're trucking down the road about 50. Got to the first curve. I made the curve, and I saw his headlights go whoop in the ditch.
Was there as many stud regulations back then as there is now? Probably not.
No. Minnesota was wide open, just like North Dakota. You could put studs on just about any time.
Okay.
Of course, later on, Minneapolis roads, heavy traffic was wearing the pavement out, so then they outlawed it.
Yeah, I feel bad for a lot of Minnesota customers that will call in and ask about getting studs, and I just say, if you've got plates on the vehicle that are from Minnesota, I can't put them on for you. Well, I live out in the backwoods. I understand, but I can't.
Probably could, but it would be up to them whether they wanted the ticket or not.
Right. And get the wrong cop on the wrong day.
Yeah.
Have to be fine.
And usually if they take them off early March, even though you might get a snowstorm or two, just so they officers can't hear them clicking on the street.
So, from an expert, I get this question all the time. Do you believe that studs make that much of a difference?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Why do you think the guys that do ice racing on the lakes run studs?
I personally feel like studs make a huge difference. I'll never go back to not having studs in the wintertime.
Yep.
But there's a couple people, every now and again you run into and they say it doesn't make a difference. And I just say, well, I don't really know what you're doing because they make a difference for me.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're on an incline and you stomp on the gas pedal and don't go anywhere, and then put studs on, march right up the hill,
Yep.
you'll know the difference.
Yep, absolutely.
Although, the manufacturers have come a long way. You have your Blizzaks, Bridgestones,
Yep.
Michelin's got a similar one and several other ones. They've figured out rubber compounding that'll actually be softer as it gets colder.
Right.
So that's a terrific adjustment in rubber compounding.
But those are for winter tires, right?
Yeah,
That's what you're talking about?
You wouldn't want to run them in the summer.
No.
Wear out fast.
Yeah. New set of tires and you'll run them out within a year.
Yeah.
So you've done all the jobs in the back. Did you ever work behind the counter selling?
Well, eventually, when I came back from the service,
Okay.
and I worked a little bit in a retread shop at one point, Band Egg. There again, I designed all the Band Egg shop. And we put it up ourselves, my dad and Jerry Roush, myself. We flew down to Grand Island, Nebraska. A Band Egg shop had been closed up in a town close by, and a friend of mine owned the Grand Island shop, Garrett Tire, and we bought all the uprights and the rails that he had left over. And then we went to St. Joe, Missouri on another airplane trip. My dad flying the plane. 100 degrees out that day. We loaded a E.W. Wiley truck with all the rail that he had taken down. Michelin had come in and put in a brand new retread plant, and they took the Band Egg plant, cut it all up, set it out in the parking lot. We took just about everything they had. Well, we got it here, then we had to recut everything because they had made a mess out of it. My dad was a good welder, so he did a lot of the welding. And with Band Egg's help, they did kind of send us a blueprint to how they thought how the rail should be laid out. But from one end of there to the other end, we rented surveyor's laser beam.
Okay.
There isn't more than a quarter inch from one end of that building to the other on the rail, so that when you push the tires, they would actually, they wouldn't take off by themselves downhill or have to push them uphill.
Okay.
So,
How many other retread plants were there at the time, like in the area? Or was it just you guys?
No, Fargo Tire was doing truck tires as well. Originally, they did car tires too, but I think once radials came out in '67, within a few years, pretty much car tire retreading was all done.
Okay.
There was a Firestone plant behind the old taco shop on University North.
Really?
And they turned out, because one year for snow tires, we hadn't built up enough, so we bought like 1,500 snow tire retreads from them.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know that they had a plant here.
Yeah, that was a district warehouse. I'm not sure if it's Oldie's Nursery or who's in that building now, where the taco shop is. It used to be.
Yeah.
Right behind it, there's a big white building. That was Firestone District Warehouse.
If I had to guess, it's something with the hospital now.
Yeah.
If I had to guess.
Yeah.
Not sure.
Then as far as competitors, Firestone had a store uptown, a retail store for car tires, and they had a truck shop, Pittsburgh Paint and Glass, right where the 10th Street underpass is.
Yep.
on Main Avenue.
Yep.
That used to be a Firestone truck tire
So you guys were all pretty close and
proximity.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That had to get nasty with advertising, trying to get all the customers.
Well, and Firestone was cutting back and doing this and that, and we ended up buying, not buying the building, but bought the business on that, and got one of their good salesmen, Ron Hartle,
Okay.
and they handled Firestone and General Tire, so we ended up with General Tires, and
Okay.
that's how we ended up with the General Tire. Trying to think of other competitors in the area, but that was the biggest one.
When when did you and your dad realize we got to expand?
You know, I wish I had the employee handbook, because I think there's a page that shows our progression.
Yeah.
So
Was there like
say 74 maybe?
was there like you guys were sitting down for dinner and he just thought, I think we need another store.
No, I think it kind of fell into our lap mostly. Bismarck store was the first one. It was a General Tire store, and General had decided to divest all of their retail stores, and I think they had 100 of them, and that was how we gained the Bismarck store. They sold it to us,
Okay.
so we ended up with retail. Well, they did some truck tires too, but it was, when you looked at the building, it was mostly a retail building.
Gotcha.
And Carrington came along several years later. Small Business Administration in North Dakota approached my dad and said, well, we have this empty building in Carrington. We'd really like to see something go in there.
Yeah.
What would you consider a tire store in Carrington? So that's how we ended up with the Carrington store. And then it was a matter of the General one in Bismarck. There was people operating that, so we hired a manager to watch that one. And eventually Kurt Lee was working for the Tower City truck stop, and we hired him away from there to manage Carrington.
Okay.
My dad, along the way, from his background of being a body man and kind of getting the shaft at Ed Shum Pontiac, you want to service the customer, you want to service your employees and your community. And so 1968, I believe, is when he started the profit sharing.
Okay.
Well, how that was generated, the government allows you 15% of your income to go into a retirement vehicle like profit sharing.
Okay.
And he was more worried about the $4 an hour guy changing tires than he was the salesman. How is somebody like that supposed to provide for his retirement?
Yeah.
They live paycheck to paycheck. So what he did is he, for purposes of the profit sharing, everybody's salary was locked in at $20,000. 15% of that is $3,000. So at the end of every year from 1968 on, we would take about $450,000, and everybody got $3,000. John got $3,000. Woody got $3,000. I got $3,000. Down the line it went. George Lavelle Lumber had a profit sharing. 15% of the owner, that was probably 15 grand. It went into his.
Yeah.
And his son, and I think he had 6 sons. They pretty much ended up with all the profit.
Yeah.
And I knew one of the workers over there in the yard. He got $200. And we saw several like that, where the normal working guy didn't get much.
Yeah.
Well, over the years from 1968 to when I stopped contributing to that, and that would be like 2014 is when we created the ESOP. That's when we stopped the profit sharing. That had grown to $10 million And a lot of people that retired that had been here for long term, 25, 30 years, ended up with $500,000-$600,000
Oh, wow.
for their retirement. One guy in Carrington, can't think of his name, kind of had wire hair stuck up everywhere. A very successful truck service driver. He could change tires like nobody tomorrow, and he weighed about 125 pounds. Skinny little guy, about 5'7".
Yeah.
But boy, could he change tires. And he didn't mind going in a pig lot, slop and pig shit everywhere and changing a flat tractor tire. He was really good. But he retired, and he had $500,000. I'm going to buy me a bass boat, and I'm going fishing.
Yeah.
You know?
I like that dream. That sounds peaceful.
But, you know, my dad really took care of the employees. That was his big deal. That and the health insurance. Health insurance got so expensive, but we were self-insured, and so we would put away, X amount in a savings account, and it would kind of be on a curve. You'd be up in the black for 3 years and down in the red for 3. It kind of went back and forth, 200,000 at the high and probably 100,000 at the low, but it always came back. So raising their health insurance by $2 a month or $5 a month, that was a big thing to my dad. Really wants to take care of the employees. That's who makes OK Tire.
Yeah.
So when it came to the ESOP, it was not a tough decision for me. I looked at it 10 years. I should have started earlier. I got information here and there, little brochures, for about 10 years, and I finally decided to go to a seminar in Minneapolis. I was surprised that most of the people there were accountants. So I got to talking over lunch hour to one of them. I said, why are you here? Well, all their customers that they did accounting for were interested in ESOPs.
Yeah.
And so they needed to get all that information so they could advise their clients. So I came back and we dug into it. It was summer. That was summer. By October, we had gotten a hold of, can't even think of the name of it now. It was like Minco or something out of Chicago, San Francisco, and they had another one in Chicago. And they came in with a 100-page book. How do you want it structured? Because there was a gazillion different ways.
Yeah.
Well, I said, it was very hard for me to get over even for everybody. $3,000 for everybody.
Yeah.
Well, that doesn't work as well for ESOPs. They usually like a percentage. So, and their I would say their thinking was pretty right on. Who drives the company? Well, partly the executives, partly the high-priced salesmen. They're who are really pushing the buttons to drive the business forward.
Right.
So shouldn't they get more? Well, I suppose so. It's on a percentage of income rather than
Right.
a locked-in $20,000 base. So I think it's as long as I can look at it and see that the bottom guy is still getting possibly his $3,000 or better, I'm okay with that.
Right.
Now, if all of a sudden he went back to $100, I wouldn't be real fond of that. But
How did it come up, the concept of ESOP to you? You had said it wasn't a hard decision for you, but was it something that you saw and thought we could do this, or did someone bring it up to you?
It actually, in my mind, started quite a bit earlier, but it was funny because my mom got mad at me. We were at the lake cabin one Sunday. She was out on the deck, and she looked really mad. I heard you're giving OK Tire away. I just broke out laughing. Mom, where did you hear that? Well, she wouldn't tell me. But I said, well, let's sit down and talk about it. Here's the deal. I'm like 68 years old. I know you and Dad figured I'd just carry on like you did,
Yeah.
Until you're 80, 90 years old. I said, I'm not planning on being here when I'm 90 years old. And I have 3 daughters that have no inclination to run a tire store. So I said, my choices are sell it to Bridgestone or Michelin, somebody that has a lot of money. Sell it to a competitor like Palms or Bauer Built, who's about 4 times bigger than we are, or sell it to the employees who made this company. Well, then she kind of softened and thought about it for a bit. I guess she didn't say one way or another, but it appeared that she wasn't mad at me anymore.
Right.
So at least she got the inkling of what it was all about. And that was my intention all along, is to make sure that it carries on, but it should carry on with the employees in mind who built it.
That's pretty powerful stuff. Thank
Yep.
you. I can't say that enough.
Yep.
I know of a handful of people that work here, that stay here, that care about this place because we're an ESOP.
And because I was willing to do that, we ran a lot of numbers, Dana and I. At the start, it was, on the evaluation of it, Meineke was the one out of Chicago and San Francisco, came in and evaluated, and it was way too high. Well, I could have asked for that, but in reality, could the company afford it? They'd be paying me till I was 100.
Yeah.
So we took a more realistic approach, cut it down about a third, and said this is how it's going to be. And so we pre-funded. We thought for 3 years we'd take that $450,000 that we'd done with the profit sharing. We'd save that each of 3 years, kind of get a down payment, go to the bank and borrow some more, and pay me half down. And then the other half I would get after they paid the bank off from what they borrowed. So this January 1, they have the bank paid off, and they will start paying me the second half over a 6-year period.
So I just kind of want to get this straight, just to kind of showcase the kind of man that you are. You were given a value.
Don't put me at too high a pedestal.
You were given a valuation of a pretty good number.
Yeah.
And then you and Dana sat down and realized that's not realistic for the employees that this is for.
Yeah.
So no, I don't want as much as it's worth. What you and your dad have built. And then you said, also, here's some money to do it. So you helped fund the purchase itself.
Yep.
That's there are no words for that. There isn't. Thank you so much.
It just I love helping people out. Not too long ago, a friend of mine, 46 years old, working every day, wasn't feeling too good. His boss said, "You better go to the hospital. You don't look so good." Sent him over there. His heart had gone down to about 20% capacity. They immediately loaded him in a helicopter, flew him down to the U of M. He's on the pacemaker list, or heart transplant list, I should say. But they've worked him back up now. He's operating at about 30%. He's back in Fargo. He's got a defibrillator in and whatnot, and comes to Saturday breakfast yet. And I put a lot of money into lend a hand for him.
Yeah.
Because that's what I like to do. What am I going to do with several $1 million? I mean, sure, I got a condo in Naples now, Florida, so I'm going to leave tomorrow or the day after. But I don't live my lifestyle,
Right.
the rich and famous, or That's not me.
No, you come in every day and you're usually dressed in jeans and an OK Tire shirt, and
I still have 12 of these shirts,
Yeah.
and I got to wear them out. I told my wife, if I die first, I don't want to be in a suit coat. I want to be comfortable. You just put my OK Tire
Yeah.
shirt on and bury me in the ground.
that's right. So we one of the I don't want to say marketing strategies, but you had an icon, right? Serviz. I'm not sure if that's what you called it, but Sam. Okay, so that's a new name, Serviz. Sam is bringing him back. What did you think of that decision?
The little man.
Yeah, the little man.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I always had an affinity for him. We had the 5, 10, 15-year pin we used to have, and that was the little man. Well, I don't know that went over all that big. I didn't see too many guys wearing the pin, but
Sam's bringing him back. He's got him as an option on all of our clothing now.
yeah, I love it. I love that new hat.
Retro.
I said it's white, but I have a white mini hat from when I had the Mini Cooper, and darn thing's getting kind of dirty, but pretty soon I'll have to start wearing the OK Tire one.
Well, there you go.
I'll get some blue ones, maybe. Some blue ones next.
Oh, okay. And I love that. I call it the Superman T-shirt. It's got the big OK on it. Very distinctive. It stands out. Terrific.
Sam's done some great things with the designing for the company.
Yeah,
Nice job, Sam.
yeah. And every now and then I see something and I don't feel, and I hope he doesn't take it that way. As I say, I noticed this. I think you should change it. So I was watching Jay Thomas the other night.
Yeah.
Our commercial came on. It wasn't where we're sponsoring him. It was an actual commercial. The little 4-wheel unit going through the mud, and they showed it up on a hoist. They were changing tires, and at the end it showed Billy's store. Well, I call it Billy's store, the South store, and it had OK Tire logo in big, and then under in white, it repeated OK Tire Inc. I said that should say employee owned.
So Sam and I were just talking about that a couple of days ago when we were talking about the podcast, and we really wanted you on here. And he said that he appreciated, and he's told that story of the things that you can still notice that other people miss, and he loves that. So no, I don't think he takes that in a negative light at all.
I like it.
I just chip in where I see something that
It's a good deal.
blow the logo up a little bigger here, or do this or that.
There you go. Keep doing it
Well-
every time. Just call him up. Sam, you can fix this, man.
Stop in my office.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the OK Roundup. It started with a thought. Car show out in front blocked the street off. Mm-hmm. And the first one was pretty pathetic. It rained. We had about 15 cars out there. But the sun came out later and dried it up, and it grew up. Pretty soon we got cars all the way down to the end of the block up on our driveway. Once we got to 100 cars, it got to be a little bit too much. So then we started looking for other places to have it.
Yeah.
And ended up at West Acres there in front of Kohl's. Did in front of TJ Maxx.
Now we do it at the Walmart off 52nd Avenue.
Yeah.
Take off half the parking lot there.
Yeah, that works the best because there's very little number of cones. I used to go to Dakota Fence and load up 300 cones. Oh, my little trailer, and and that was a lot of work picking them all back up afterward.
Yeah, we definitely don't have as many cones, but it's an operation. We've got salesmen that are mandatory to come there. We got walkie-talkies.
Yeah.
We got people trying to point the way on where to go.
And there again, we had a couple employees do the hot dogs. Dave Barr and Paul Gray did hot dogs several years, and then they kind of bowed out. And then I got a hold of some church group,
Yeah.
and they've been doing it ever since. So I bet the church group has been doing it for 20 years. We're on about our 35th, 38th. I don't know.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, I got one of the plaques for every year. The dash plaques.
Good deal.
I think I'm probably missing 1 year or someplace in there. But anyway, yeah. Can't even think of her name, but I think she's been with it almost the whole time. But I think there's a couple new gals now that are doing it for the church.
Yeah.
But it was so easy when Pepsi had their hot dog and pop stand, because then you could just open up the window and it was all right there.
Yep.
But Pepsi, not Pepsi itself, but a separate unit, Pepsi Inc. or something, ran those trailers, and washing them out when all that syrup gets spilled, they just got tired of it. I can see why they probably got out of it.
Said be done with
Too
it.
bad the church couldn't have bought one of the trailers and just did it themselves.
Yeah. Well, I think we can take a break. I gotta go to the bathroom.
I could use a cup of coffee.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's how. So my dad's stores then are now owned by my sisters.
Okay.
So this building, the commercial center, Bismarck Retail, and that's about it, I guess, 4 stores. So I started my first store. Well, the first one I built, it's actually his store, was the commercial center here in Fargo.
Oh, okay.
So I called him up. I had laid out the blueprint, what I wanted, went and got a fancy blueprint all done up. And I called him up one day and I said, well, you probably want to come in for the breaking ground, what they call that.
Yeah.
And, what's going on? Well, I spent several $100,000 of your dollars buying a lot and starting construction on the commercial center. So he came in, the groundbreaking, and he's kind of laughed because he didn't really retire. What he did is he just floated off. So I can't remember exactly how it started, but I went over to the house one day, and everything in a double-stall garage was laying out in the driveway. And I went in there and he sheetrocked it, he insulated it, sheetrocked it, taped and textured it, framed up every window like you do your house. Geez, what are you building, a dance hall here or what? For years, race cars is what they built in there, and had all this equipment, saws and welders and you name it. They never had a car in the garage, ever. So he said, I'm going to build an airplane. Really? So okay. So they got rid of all the crap out in the front, and pretty soon he's got wood saws, he's got lathes, he's got table saws, all the equipment for building an airplane. He happened to be at a convention out in the West Coast, close to Portland, Oregon. And a guy took him for a ride in an amphibian aircraft, landed in a little puddle. And this guy landed it with a stick between his legs to show him how maneuverable it was.
Okay.
So he just got hot on it. Yeah, I got to build one of those. So he started it in the garage, and it was too big, so they ended up putting a big tarp thing out one of the doors, about another 20 feet, because it looks like a boat, fiberglass shell, and then you have to put all the stringers in it. You have to build all the wings by hand. And it took him 23 years to build that. But it kept him busy and out of my hair. So I don't know if he did that on purpose. It was like, you take OK Tire and do it, and if I had a question, I'd call him. Otherwise, don't bother him. But I think it was his way of not putting his thumb in it all, and counteracting whatever I was doing.
Is there just kind of jumping tracks here? Is there like a favorite memory that you have thinking back to all your years here? Or even if you've got a couple of them.
Favorite memories. Well, the car shows were always a highlight of my year. I always just like to do the roundups. Yeah, I guess one of the memories with Carrington, Kurt Lee was the manager there. And I think in the old days when we had those managers, they had a lot more latitude to what they do now. They were part of the family, so to speak. And Bruce Birkeland out of Bismarck always referred to it as the Ohnstad family. You gave us this building, you gave us this chance to do our thing, and you left us alone, kind of more so.
Right.
So we didn't have a lot of rules and regulations. As time went on, we had more and more. But I mean, Kurt Lee took that store from nothing and really built a huge following. He got cancer, and he was up at the hospital here at Merit Care. And I went up there to visit him on the last day or two he was alive, and tears in his eyes. And he just thanked me profusely for letting him do his thing. He said, you and your dad, you never come out, ream my ass. You never told me I had to do this or that. You encouraged me to do stuff. And I built that store the way I thought it should be. And so it was kind of a highlight to hear somebody say that they thought we did as good as anybody could.
Yeah.
You know.
That's pretty cool. That's, again, pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah.
The impact that you guys have been able to make for the better.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a job that you hated the most when you were younger?
When I was younger or older?
I guess anytime. I can tell you when I was in the shop, I hated.
Yeah, the first day I went to work, one of the first days, my job was to clean up the back lot. See, we didn't own the whole block then. We just owned this part. And we had a little pickup box. They used to make them out of trailers, out of pickup boxes. And this one had some wood sides on it. And all the garbage went in there. The kids in the neighborhood could come down there and throw shit everywhere. And what they were looking for was tubes that they could salvage and air up and
Go sledding.
Yeah, sled and bounce around the backyard, whatever. But they would make a mess. So here I am, probably 13, 14 years old, and I'm cleaning up the back lot because of the mess they made. And these kids come over and start in again. And this one kid, he was pretty heavy set. And him and I got into a little bit of an argument, and I ended up bopping him one. And I never had any problem after that. But I quit 3 times that day. I went home and grumbled to Mom about the shit I had to do. But then an hour later, I went back to work. So I quit 3 times the first day. That was a tough day.
I bet.
Yeah.
Dealing with the block bullies.
Yeah. Other times, I would say more difficult times, maybe changing truck tires. I got back from the service. They decided that I should learn the truck tire business. E.W. Wiley had the sugar beet. Apparently, my dad and Ron Hartle had got the contract for the sugar beet Wiley fleet, and then they somehow lost it to Fargo Tire. And Fargo Tire, I think, had it 3 or 4 years. Instead of Bridgestone, they were using Toyo tires. Toyo was having a heck of a time keeping tires together. I think they would do okay on the original tread, but the retread would fall apart. And they had a couple that ran off the road because the tire blew out or something, and there was some hard feelings. So Wiley's came back to us and wanted us to bid on it. And I remember we had several lunch, Ron and my dad and I. Ron was a sales manager at the time, and discussing how do we bid this thing. Because Wiley's wanted it on a cost per mile basis. So let's say they ran 500,000 miles a month because they had all those locations. They had Drayton, East Grand Forks, Moorhead, Wahpeton, and Renville, which is 200 miles south. And that's how come they rack up the miles so much. But then they would calculate it on, 6 cents a mile, 5, whatever your bid was. And that's what they'd pay. Well, how do you put on tires and compute that?
Yeah.
So we were really uneasy about it. And we bid it real high, like 7.5 cents per 1,000 miles. And so they said, go to Grand Forks. Trucks will be coming in, inspect them, this and that. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. Because I started on the long haul fleet. They had bought 30 green, kind of fluorescent green trucks used out of Texas. And they were all up there, and what they were doing is they were hauling lime rock back from Duluth and maybe sugar beet pellets the other way, but whatever, it was loaded both ways. So I was just taking care of the 30 trucks. So I get up there and I expect these trucks to come rolling in. I'll hurry up and inspect them, and off they would go. Well, I only saw 5 or 6 trucks between noon and 6 p.m. and I got to go home. And then I find out half these guys live between Duluth and Grand Forks. So they just drive the truck to their house and stop for the night. So I never would have seen them. So it was kind of a hit and miss deal. But apparently I was doing okay, so that when the sugar beet thing got changed from Fargo Tire to us, then they wanted me to also do that. So then it was Drayton on Grand Forks and Crookston on Monday, Drayton on Tuesday. That way I could come back through there, drop off something if I missed. But I had an inspection sheet of all the trucks on that, whatever location it was, and the trailers. And if I circled them in red, it was get these tires off ASAP. If it was in yellow, I'd highlight it. You got from now until next 3-4 days. And I never had a wreck, except one. I head over at Moorhead, put a new set of steering tires on a truck, and 2 days later, it went off the County Road 20 where the big curve is out there.
Yep.
Went off into the field, buried in the snow, about 6 feet deep in snow.
Oof.
And, I got excited. I ran out there with a pickup, waded through the snow. They had a flat repair. They were on the Del Ripple run, which is gravel, and you pick up a lot of nails. So they had a flat on the left front during the night, and they put the old tire back on. Well, they wore it right down to the tube. And that's why it went off the ditch. And when I saw that old wore-out tire on there, I'm off the hook. But, yeah, that was several years. It was kind of hard because I think when we got that contract, it was August, about 2 weeks before the fleet was going to start. And so all the trailers are parked in East Grand Forks on slabs where they pile sugar beets, except none of the tires matched. They'd have a brand new retread and then old wore-out used one next to it. And on the other side of the trailer, all odd everything. So young kid about 16 years old, Jay Rogney, his dad asked if I could put him to work, and I said sure. So we took a service truck and a pickup and trailer, started in trying to match everything up, and Jay had hair down to here, and I think he was on smoking a little pot or something half the time. So, his dad Dwayne wanted me to straighten him out a little bit. I didn't really have to. We're out there. It's 85, 90 degrees. We're rattling all those off, and he's sweating, and the hair got shorter. Every week he went and got another haircut. I think the hair got a little shorter, and I worked him so hard he didn't have time to smoke anything. Anyway, so he worked the whole school year. Then I would bring the tires back to get retreaded. He'd take the tubes out of them, pile them up, but he'd have to dunk them in water to see if they had a leak before he put them back in when the retread got done. So I would take those retreads back. The mechanics actually changed them on the rims, and but I worked his ass off. His dad thanked me one time.
I imagine he hated you most of the time.
Oh no, I don't think so.
No?
We became pretty good buddies. Yeah.
Good deal.
Yeah, we just worked hard, but yeah, we had the sugar beet fleet for a number of years, and then we lost it again. Wiley's, it was the bid came up. Apparently, every 10 years or 20 years, whatever, the bid would come up, and out of Great Falls, Montana, Trans Systems came in, and whoever got the bid, they had to provide brand new trucks. Because the Wiley fleet was really old, and they were all wore out. They were using Mack trucks, and they owned the Mack dealership, so that didn't phase them any. They could buy new trucks cheap.
Yeah.
But Transsystem got the bid. We went after them the same as Wiley's. They said, well, you know how we've been doing it. I'd go to Drayton one day a week. They'd have about 25 spare tires in their little back room. All mounted, ready to just rotate on, and I just kept replenishing them. No, they wanted a service truck with a driver parked on site, like, I don't know, 24/7 or.
That wasn't doable, was it?
No, I said, no, can't do that.
Yeah.
Well, Schumacher's did Grand Forks and Crookston, I think. I don't know who did the rest. I was glad to actually get out of it.
Yeah.
To tell you the truth, I was getting pretty tired of the whole thing.
So I think one of my favorite things looking back in the history is there is a picture in the newspaper of like a old Jeep maybe on the side of the building. Tell me about that one.
Oh God, that was one of the favorite stories. General Tire had a couple of years in a row, and they had this contest. And so what they would do is it's a $1,000 grand prize for whatever company could come up with the best sales promotion or something. So they had a term, general grabbers. Well, I wanted to put a big sign out there, general grabbers go anywhere. And so we took our snowplow, which is a little International Scout, so it's fairly short. And I thought, we'd pull that up the wall and hang it up there, and then put that general grabber go anywhere sign. And then the next year we'll go down to the bank building. We'll pull it up about 5 stories high. We'll keep doing better and better on it. Well, everybody thought I was nuts anyway. I went over to Valley House Movers. They were on the next block over, kind of in the residential section, 2 Quonset huts, and I walked in there and talked to Mark. Mark, I want to pull a vehicle up the wall, and he just looked at me. Are you nuts or what? So they came over and looked at it, and we said, they have those big winch trucks for doing houses. Park it in the back lot, run a cable up the building, cross and back down. And so they went and got some really heavy angle iron, like must have been 6 inches, 8 inches each way, angle, and about 10 feet long. They wanted to spread the weight out, and then they made a roller to it, so the cable would be on this roller, and then they put one on the front side of the building, ran it down. Well, it would have probably been more unique if the building had been taller or the vehicle was shorter. I didn't quite envision, or measure what that would look like. But as they pulled it up, they could only go so high within a couple of feet. But the building's only, 26 to 30 feet, and the vehicle is at least 20. So they couldn't get all the way to the top. They had to leave about 4 to 6 feet. So the back bumper was only about 4 or 5 feet off the ground.
That's still pretty cool.
And as soon as it started pulling up, it kind of like the back bumper was scraping. What they did is they put some planks up the building so that the front tires could kind of touch the building and start to go up. Then we put some red cones out there, and people were doing double takes. They would roar on down the block, 30 miles an hour, and then all of a sudden, what the hell was that, And you could hear brakes screeching, and tires squawking. Somebody almost ran into somebody in front of them. And,
Oh, my gosh.
This went on for about 2 days. Well, we did not win the contest.
What? What won?
Williston, OK Tire Williston won the nationwide contest. They had a dirt hauler bring in a huge pile of dirt, and they put a vehicle on top, and then they had the local shrubbery company, a nursery, put plants all around it and took pictures of it and whatnot. But I think more so they had this book, like a 3-ring binder, and they would enter your name. You bought a set of tires, enter your name in there, and then you got free rotate for life. Because a lot of places used to charge for rotate.
Yeah.
The OK Classic Club, I think they called it. And you got every 5th oil change free. So they were building a binder full of customers. And General Tire thought that was pretty unique. So they got the $1,000. We didn't.
I feel like scaling the side of a building is pretty cool. I'd like to know who was on that deciding committee because they were wrong. Did you see like sales go up at all from that? Like have more people stop in at least?
I don't recall that happening. But
No.
We got a lot of exposure out of it, I think.
Yeah.
Picture in the paper and so forth. And another one that they had a contest. General Tire was pretty unique, and they had other tire companies. They had a lot of promotions. So they decided to give a Pontiac Fiero. Actually, they gave 2 of them away nationwide.
Okay.
So I went over to Selling Motors, got a Pontiac Fiero, parked it out front, put a little sign, come in and sign up for it. Plus different sets of tires. I think they gave like 40 or 50 sets of tires away. Williston gave away a set. We gave away a set. But we had a lot of people come in. You didn't have to buy nothing. Just come in, put your name in a hat.
Yeah.
Nobody won the Fiero here, but it was kind of a unique deal.
That's still pretty cool.
Yeah.
Would you say that you prefer any brand over another?
Nah, not necessarily, but on my wife's 4-wheel drive Pathfinder, I always put on a new set about every 4 years. Destination LEs.
Mm-hmm.
I think my daughter has a set on her 4-wheeler. Yeah.
Firestone's a good brand.
Yeah. General had another unique program called the Future Leader Program.
Okay.
So by this time, I'm about 40 years old, so maybe a little older, 35 to 40, somewhere in there. They could see that the generational changeover was going to happen.
Yeah.
The founding fathers of most tire stores were getting older, and they wanted to get close to the next generation. So there was 3 meetings. I went to the one in Cincinnati, and there was probably about 20 of us there. And they said, well, what do you guys want? We all had the same deal. We've been pushing broom, helping Dad change tires. We'd like to see the checkbook. We'd like to get a little more involved,
Yeah.
just pushing broom and being the flunky. So what they wanted is they wanted to introduce us to the president of sales, marketing guys, advertising, financial, all the people. So if we had a question, we could pick up the phone and call somebody because we'd actually met them. And so from this 3 different meetings, they formulated the Future Leader Program. So the first meeting was in Indianapolis 500, about 2 weeks before the Indy race.
Okay.
So there was about 18 of us there. All you had to do was, when they put out the word, hurry up and sign up. And so it was the first 18 or something. I don't know. They couldn't invite everybody. So I got there, and they had a breakfast meeting. They went over passenger high-performance tires, kind of and we got to meet Bill Eaton, the vice president of retail sales. And then we got to go to the Indy track, watch hot laps. They were going around and around and around, one at a time mostly. But they come by that. They were on turn 2, second level. There's a suite. I think there's 6 or 8 in that suite. And they come around 200 miles an hour. But so you got to walk around the track pretty much the whole half a day, down to the museum. And if you wanted to, you could go down in the pits and wander the pit area. So about 3 o'clock, Bill says to me, have you been down to the pit yet? I'd been to the museum and I'd walked around. And no, I haven't. He said, well, come on along. So Bill and myself and this other guy jump in a Suburban, and there's a tunnel under the track, and you come out in the infield. And we get out, and we're walking down where all the garages are. Here's Mario Andretti and his son Michael. Michael's sitting in the car, and they're talking. And as we're walking up, Mario says, oh, how's it going, Parnelli? Here, the other guy that's along with, that's Parnelli Jones. So I'm going, holy I'm in amongst the in crowd here at the Indy, that's for sure. So they're talking and whatnot, and then I'm take my hat off, get them to sign my hat. And then we're standing at the start line, and Parnelli is telling me, well, do you know how they line up all 33 cars? Well, I said, I thought they did it by laps. Whoever was the fastest got the pole position, blah, blah, blah. Well, yeah, that's kind of right, but they do it all in that one Saturday, and they draw the names out of the hat. So at 8 o'clock in the morning, whoever was won, he got to go. Next guy is at 8:30, or along. But the trick is, as the sun comes up, the track gets hotter.
Yeah.
And it gets stickier. So you don't want to be 8 o'clock. You want to be like noon or 1 o'clock. But if it rains at 1 o'clock, how you were positioned coming out of the hat, that's it. So those guys that were from 8 to noon all got to be on time, and everybody else, because it rained and they couldn't go out there, however they drew them out of the hat, you might be last. So it was pretty interesting. And it was then that night as we're having supper, these guys are all younger, probably in their 30s. Racing, to chow down, big table with chairs on both sides, a round table on the end. So I just come sauntering in. Well, it was Bill Eaton, Parnelli's, a kid from Riverside, California, and me. And so I got to know Parnelli pretty good. We're talking snowmobiling in Utah, and apparently he got up pretty close to an elk, and then the elk kind of jumped. I mean, he was up to his belly on snow, but Parnelli was going to pet him. Kind of scared him anyway. So years later, I wouldn't say years later. Anyway, I go back to Future Leader program. The next one was in St. Louis at a truck tire, Mount Vernon, Illinois, which is 100 miles from St. Louis. So we all met in St. Louis. Next day we'd go out to the plant then and watch them build truck tires. And boy, was that interesting. That was one of the best tours I ever had. And then we went from there. Oh, then in the wintertime, 1st December, 18 people got to go to Akron, and then we got what we wanted was the financials.
Okay.
So they brought in the head guy, and I can't think of his name, but he was going to teach us, the industry RMA standards are 6 turns of inventory per year. So if you're I don't know how you calculate that. Like if you have $1 million in inventory, you got to turn it 6 times.
Yep.
So sales would have to be 6 million then, apparently. Anyway, and then some of the cash ratios and all the stuff that you'd ever think about. And so I thought, I got all this stuff down pat. But these guys, we were at the Residence Inn, and we were in pairs. So I was in this, it's almost like a condominium. I was on the bottom floor with the bedroom. Joey Conti, who was about 19, 20, was on the next level. And it was a whole week-long deal. So they brought in Jeff Gibbs from advertising. They brought in different people from different departments. You got their phone numbers, and if you got questions, call. So I tried to wake up Joey Conti the next morning. They'd been out to the club, and Pete bought a table about that size with shot glasses of tequila. I bet Joey must have had 10 or 12.
Oh, goodness.
So I couldn't get him to wake up in the morning. I was up there, threw water on him. Finally, I just hauled him out of bed, threw him in the bathtub, turned the water on. He finally kind of revived, but all day long he just kind of sat like this. He was just blitzed. But then that was like December 1st, and then their convention was a month later, San Diego or whatever it was. One of the 18 came up to me and said, "Mr. Conti's looking for you." Oh, what's all this about? Well, he finally did find me, and I thought, so I'm probably in the mafia here. Conti didn't sound good. And he just slapped me on the back, said, I like the way you taught my boy how to live, or how to be a man or something. I didn't teach him a damn thing other than throw him in the bathtub and revive him.
Run some cold water.
Yeah, he was out of it.
That was, so General put that on, right?
Yeah.
So that would have been in the 70s then? Because isn't the 80s when Continental bought General out?
Yeah, it could have been, yeah. I got to stop and think. Well, if I was 40, let's see. 50 and 40 would have been probably 80s.
Okay.
Mid-80s.
I'm not exactly sure what the year was, but...
Yeah. Anyway, it was... Again, Parnelli was at the meeting, and so I called Bill up. That was my connection, vice president of sales. Called Bill up. Bill, does Parnelli do personal appearances? Well, what do you have in mind? I said, well, I'm in a Toppers Car Club, and we do a charity car show. We have the proceeds go to children's things, mostly like Make-A-Wish and some of those types of deals. Well, send me a little agenda of what you're going to do with them. Okay, so it was typed out. Okay, have them come in on a Thursday. We'll do uptown. They had that 3-foot square block, fresh concrete. Celebrities put their footprints in them.
Oh, okay.
Write their name or whatever. And I think they have those all out there at the Visitors Bureau on along the interstate there.
Yeah.
Have you ever been out there?
I've never been there, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
Originally, they had them uptown. I think Express Press or some printing outfit had them in the sidewalk in front of their place.
Okay.
So anyway, got Parnelli in there, and the DJ was Dan Michaels, and Parnelli's looking at this fresh concrete. And there was a crowd of about 30 people in Express Press, and it was kind of like a press conference. And, any suggestion? He said, well, race car drivers aren't they known for their right lead foot? So he's got these $500 Gucci shoes on, puts his foot in that cement. I don't know, he put his handprints in there. I think he wrote his name. And a nice gal, had a 5-gallon bucket of water. She wiped his shoe all off. Anyway, then we went from there. We had lunch. Might have been a Friday. Anyway, I arranged for had the governor of North Dakota, Ed Schaefer, and his wife Nancy, the mayor of Fargo, the mayor of Moorhead, and the mayor of West Fargo, all for lunch.
Oh, wow.
And then we invited 3 or 4 topper members for breakfast, 3 or 4 different ones for lunch, and then the same thing for supper.
Yeah.
And during the show then, it's a Saturday, Sunday show, I said, I'm not going to have them just sit at a table 8 hours and sign autographs.
Yeah.
We will try and keep them entertained. But it was fun. He brought in 8x10 glossy with him in his car that he drove in the 1962 Indianapolis 500. It was a turbine, first time a turbine car had ever been. And he was well ahead until the transmission went out or something. But anyway, he would sign those, or race car people would brought in like these newspapers. It was sports, I forget what, Sports Speed News or something, and they had articles of him in there, and he'd sign that. Or we had these painter hats that were like 83 cents. I mean, they were like a paper hat, more or less, with a bill on them. And so we're sitting at the table, and he's signing autographs. And his father-son come along, and this kid couldn't have been more than about 4 years old, maybe. Not too much taller than the table. And kid comes walking up, and Parnelli leans over to him and says, would you like a hat? And just like an adult, well, that'd be quite all right. He said, but no, thank you. We were just floored. This kid was so polite, we just couldn't believe it. Well, his dad was looking at a car across the aisle, and the kid was just kind of standing there on his own. Well, would you like an autograph? No, that's all right. Thank you anyway. Finally, the dad turned around and kind of looked where the kid was, and I think we ended up giving him a hat. But it cracked up Parnelli so bad he couldn't quit laughing for about 10 minutes. But I think that lunch with Ed and Nancy was a good deal, because Ed was in the car business in Bismarck. I think his father had a car dealership. And Ed has a lot of antique cars. He's got a Studebaker, one of those bullet nose ones from 1948, 49, somewhere in that area, convertible. Or maybe it wasn't a convertible to start with, but he made it a convertible. And then he's got a bunch of NASCAR Pontiacs.
Okay.
2 of them, I think, that were actual raced in NASCAR. And so he was a car nut, so they got along real well. That was kind of a highlight. But I learned there was 3 mistakes at Firestone. He raced for Firestone. But Parnelli himself had 25 tire stores in and around L.A.
Oh, okay.
And when they put his name on the side of a tire, they actually had a tire that said Parnelli Jones on it in white letters. Instead of taking a royalty on every tire, he took a discount. So he would get his tires better price than anybody else.
Yeah.
And $3-4 a tire, whatever it was. But he invented a radio jingle, and a TV commercial. You'll love your stones, Firestones. And he spent about $30,000, he said, on this campaign. And Firestone copied it and went nationwide with it, never paid him a nickel. Oh. That's one.
Yeah.
And then number 2, he was sending container loads of these white lettered tires to Japan. Apparently the people in Japan just loved this Parnelli Jones look on the side of their car,
Yeah.
white lettered tires. So being he had this discount on them, he could box them up in a container and send it to Japan. And he was making good money. They undercut him. They loaded up their own container loads and took them over there and started
Oh no.
distribute them. That's number 2, he said. And I don't remember what number 3 was, but that's when he severed contact with Firestone.
Well, those are some pretty big infractions.
And Bill Eaton was actually on his pit crew when he raced at Indy. So him and Bill Eaton, and of course Bill is at General Tire now. And so they were good buddies. And that's how come I got to meet Parnelli, was at the General Tire meetings and
Yeah.
Future Leader program and stuff. And,
That's pretty progressive for that time.
yeah.
The future leader deal.
When he came here, one of his requests was a $500 contribution to his charity, which it's called the City of Hope. It's a hospital in L.A., and it's your last chance hospital. When you are so serious you're about to pass away, this is your last chance type deal. And a lot of head injuries and that type of stuff were. But anyway, that was his contribution, was we got to give him $500 to his charity. And then we provided hotel room and accommodations while he was here.
Yeah.
They have a Saturday night party, and he got a little wound up. That's where he told the story of the 3 chances.
Yeah.
He'd had a few beers by then.
Is there you've talked about charity a couple of times. Is there like something that you've always made sure to do over the years, whether it's for OK Tire or just you and your family personally, to give back to the community?
Yeah, I have my favorite charities, and I keep track of them on my computer so I don't miss one every year. I love the animal stuff, so animal shelter up on the north side there, I give them a boatload every year. And then Salvation Army, and I'm trying to think of some of the other ones. The veterans, there's a Wounded Warrior. Another one is one of those Mercy ships that does all the cleft lip. I think one of them is called Smile Train. I forget what the other one's called. And but I like giving mostly to local stuff.
All right. Well, what are we at? Almost one?
Yeah, that was quite the stretch.
That was long. Do you have anything
Yeah.
else you want to talk about?
Not that I can think of, but I think what I need to do is bring that sheet with the sort of the progression of the different buildings and that. If we sat down again, I could probably think of at least a half a dozen more stories.
Here's what I think we should propose to Dana. Hear me out. Right? You're down in Naples for the wintertime.
Yeah.
I think we should bring all this stuff
To
down
Naples.
there. That's right. That's right. And we could do this for a whole day.
Well, Dana's coming to Naples for a board meeting. He did last year too.
Yeah.
Nice.
You could just get a couple road buddies with him.
Well, you can probably save up a spot for me when I get back in April. And maybe
Absolutely.
I looked on that progression list, and then I could think of a half a dozen more stories how this building came to be or that.
When are you coming back in April?
Well, we're usually back around the 1st of April,
Okay.
first couple days. I got to get my quarterly taxes to the IRS. When I was growing up and going through all these stages, I had a tax guy, Rick Eagleson, just an individual. He did a lot of taxes for people. And I never paid anything quarterly. At the end of the year, I had a $100,000 bill I had to send in.
Oof.
But all of a sudden, I thought, well, I probably should get with Eid Bailey because that's where OK Tire does their taxes, and And we're starting to do estate planning for mom and dad. And I'm leaning a lot on them for advice. And so I thought I better get hooked up. Well, then they wanted me to go to the quarterly. So I was combining all the other rent that I get from Motley, Minot, Bismarck Commercial Center, and those buildings that were paid off when they send a rent in, I was just putting that onto Watford City's mortgage. So I was taking it down at a pretty fast rate for a year. But then all of a sudden, I ran out of my personal savings. And I told Dana, well, you better quit sending that to that mortgage. You better just put it in my savings. Because all of a sudden I'm getting hit with these, big quarterlies. And so that's what we did. So that's why I say I don't know if I'll ever get Watford City paid off, because I had to stop.
Well, Jim, thanks for coming on. Thanks for giving us the wealth of stories and knowledge. I've learned a few things today that I didn't know. I don't know about Sam.
Appreciate the opportunity to tell some of the history. And just remember from the beginning, John's important things: employees, customers, and community. That's who you service. So I try to follow those rules, and it's worked out very well.
I love that. We're excited to have you back next year, 2025.
Okay.
We'll go through some more stories.
All right.
All right. Thanks, Jim.
Okay, thank you.